Good evening, everyone. We are back, and it is once again myself, the Calm Scribe, being joined by my co-host, Billy, Travis, myself, and being joined by Billy. And we're going to be breaking down After the Roll, Legend of Vox Machina, Season 1, Episode 9, The Tide of Bone. And as I was saying, LJ is still off on her side quest and will not be joining us tonight. But how are you tonight, Billy?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I do have to say, I saw the title of the episode when I viewed it, but hearing you say it really just brings a smile to my face. It's so fun. A Tide of Bone is such a great title for an episode.
And that's really, I mean, they've done some good tie-ins. Like the Scanbo episode, we actually see Scanbo come in. It was after he talks about Scanbo, but this
Yeah,
one really was like, it was a tide of bone. And there was
yeah,
wave after wave after wave of these things coming after them, which was pretty wild. So,
absolutely.
and then it all gets resolved in a table flipping manner, but we'll get to
Yeah.
that. So, let's start off. What did you think of the cold open on this one?
So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and just state right away that I think the cold open in this one is the best part of the episode. I this is sort of what I mentioned I wanted at the end of our last discussion last week. I wanted more backstory on the Briarwoods, like why you have this opportunity to give us this story. Why aren't we getting it? And then, lo and behold, cold open. I start to get my wish. I still want more.
Yeah.
I want to know what's going on, but I liked it. It felt like these are living, breathing characters. I'll put those in quotes, living, breathing characters. Um, and there's some kind of reason for just the insanity that's happening. They're not just, Silas isn't just a vampire for the sake of being a vampire. There was a reason behind it, and I liked that.
Yeah. And as we find out later in the episode, he doesn't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
He is almost as much in the dark on some of this stuff as we are. Because there's the point where he looks at her, Delilah, and says, "What did you do?" to get them to this point. One thing I found that I really liked about this, because I do like the rule of three when it comes to writing, is they use the rule of three in this one very well, and that is with the mirror. In the bedchamber, we see her when the doctor says there's nothing else we can do, and she gets angry and jumps up and throws the glass at the mirror and shatters it, and then she runs off to the temple building, abandoned structure, abandoned library, finds all of the books that are in the library, and then doesn't find what she's looking for, but then gets kind of called by the Whispered One to that book and comes back. And she saves him by using a piece of the broken mirror, part mirror number 2, to carve into her arm. And then when he does come back and they hug, there's this beautiful moment where, because she has no idea what's happening. She doesn't know what the spell is. She doesn't know what the book is. She wasn't necessarily going to find that book from the looks of it. It was just a book that called out to her. And then she does the spell and she looks in the mirror hugging Silas, and he is not there. And there's this kind of moment of like this look of like shock and reflection on her face as she's seeing his lack of reflection. So I just love the fact that from a writing perspective, they actually used the rule of three in a beautiful manner in this way and tied it all together really nicely.
Yeah, and as you said, with the look that she gives when she sits in the mirror and sees that he doesn't have a reflection, and she kind of has that shocked, confused look on her face, but then you see her accept it because she got what she wanted. The whole idea of this is that Silas was dying, and she didn't want him to die or wanted to keep him, and she found a way. And I think that speaks a lot about her motivations as a character, is that she has such a connection to Silas that death wasn't even going to do them part.
Yeah. And that's what I'm kind of curious where this endgame is, because throughout the episode, a couple of times, she keeps saying how you have no idea how important you are. And so at first I was like, well, is she going to sacrifice him, or is she going to do something? Like, there's something involved greater with this, but no, there's that love tie-in there. They're so connected that he's not going to be a sacrifice. And it's not like she has made a pact with the Whispered One. She just did a spell to bring the Whispered One.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how they did that with the face coming through the ceiling and the purple
That was
glowing
really cool.
eyes. Like the purple tie-in throughout all this entire series has been beautiful. Not just because purple is one of my favorite colors, but it's just been the color scheme that they have going through the series has been fantastic.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so I've been really excited to see that. But then, yes, he's turned into a vampire, and then at the end of that scene, I like the fact that they don't just leave that scene in the past. They come back to the present, and that's where she says, like, we are the Whispered One's blood. And he looks at her and says, my dear, what did you do? And then it cuts. And then we're into the rest of the story.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a famous Canadian reporter, and that was his thing. I can't remember who it was. But at the end of every story that he would do, or maybe it was not Canadian, North American, and that's the thing is, his sign off was, and now you have the rest of the story. And we're about to get into that. So it starts off with the bodies hanging in the tree. I love that they keep reflecting back to this and going back to this. But there is... they come back alive.
Yeah. A little
second chance
going on. Yeah.
Hey, we are getting a raid with a party of 16 by Tillin Artho.
Holy cow.
Welcome, Raiders. Thank you for the raid. Unfortunately,
Absolutely.
we don't have the sound thing up because this is a talk thing, but welcome, Raiders. My name, I'm just going to do a quick welcome thing here. We're just going to pause momentarily to check this out. So this is a little bit about who I am, and for everyone that is already here, let's give Tillin some love. If I can spell their name correctly. There we go. Thank you very much. How did your stream go? How did Tillin? I hope you had a great stream. Hey, no, not an interruption at all. Welcome everyone. So what do we do on Monday nights is we do After the, and tonight we're doing After the Roll for this. Right now we're breaking down the Legend of Vox Machina. We're on episode 9, The Tide of Bone. We have 3 more left for this. So welcome, Raiders. So yes, we have the bodies in the tree, and they've got the second chance at life.
Yeah, it was visually very stunning to see this, and as you said, to have them come back to the bodies in the tree again. It's a very cool thing, and as you know, having seen the end of the last episode, we're about to have some kind of large undead problem. There has been skeletons and zombies walking through the streets, and now we've got them hanging from ropes in the Sun Tree. So things are about to go down.
Yeah, things are about to go off, and that's something that and the pan back of that, where they just show that yes, these bodies are alive, and then there's just again it's kind of the way they ended the last episode of the pan back and seeing all of these people that were there.
Yep.
Or all the undead that were there. The thing that I found with this that was kind of problematic for me is there was no payoff for it.
Yeah.
Because so much of this story in this episode, about half of it is basically at the base of the Sun Tree, and nothing happens. We never see these characters. We never see them like rip themselves out of the tree and fall down on top of the group, which would have been a fantastic thing to do. They just kind of come alive and I guess have front row seats for what's happening.
Yeah, it was very interesting to have that moment where we get to see them suddenly come alive, but then not have them involved in the story in any way. As far as I can remember, the group doesn't even take note to the fact that those ones are alive.
Yeah.
We just after the pan, we forget about them.
Yeah. There's no recollection, no recollection, no recognition, nothing. They just look up and it's gone. And
when you think about the fact that Keyleth has so many times stopped and acknowledged the bodies in the trees, I think that's a huge miss to not have that thing that we've kind of been programmed to think about every time Keyleth is in the shot with the tree is that she looks at the bodies in the tree, and then we don't get it.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I find is was problematic for this, is because we've often said during these after the shows that, you know, perhaps you're going to deal with this at a later time, or it's going to come back, and they may yet for this, but it's a missed opportunity. It's not going to have anywhere near the punch that it could have had they been involved in this episode. And I actually have watched an episode ahead, and there is something in the next episode that I was just like, I might ask that question today, because it kind of ties into this one as well. But I may actually, I'll probably leave it for next week. There's certain people that are conspicuously missing from everything that's happening.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Let's just say certain family members that I was like, where are they? They're certain, if all the undead are being brought back to life, there's a few family members that should most definitely be involved in this.
Absolutely.
Anyways, but then, so they're surrounded by the bones, and they are chased away, and they get to a safe house where we meet with Archie and everyone else. And I mean, in this episode, we actually do see some of the fighters die. Like the village fighters are dying off and getting cut or turned into zombies that are coming through. Talon, it's great that you had an awesome stream. That's great. And good luck on the research and the query letter work for your agent. That's awesome. But that's another bone that I have to kind of pick on this, is Archie is still bloody bleeding.
Yep.
Everyone else is healed miraculously moments after something happens to them, and Archie is still bleeding. It's been a couple of days, and he hasn't washed his neck yet.
No one has thought to give that boy a touch of healing. He only had his ear ripped off, but...
Yeah. Or to clean him up, or to change his bandage.
Anything.
I understand that we're in the middle of a war, but you kind of don't want to have sepsis or some kind of infection starting in your ear, of all places, because you haven't changed your bandages. So there's the thing of continuity and carrying over injuries and wounds and stuff, which they didn't do for Vox Machina, and now they're overdo with Archie. I don't think they're going to carry that much further for Archie anymore. But yeah, that was something that kind of stood out to me, where I was a little bit disappointed that it just, for the first 6 episodes being so tight and everything so neatly bundled together, and just these last 3 episodes so far have had so many missteps and oversights and just quick reactions to things that it's been kind of shocking.
And I would go as far as to say the oversight with Archie's lack of healing is really the least of the problems. Like, that's just something that you kind of go, you know, it's a little unfair here that the heroes that we're supposed to feel are being threatened at every corner get to be pristine in the next scene, and Archie's still suffering. But there's other things going on here that will be center stage.
There's a lot of things that we're going to come up, and we're going to talk about that. But my thing being is just, I talk about speed bumps when you're writing. Hey, thanks for the bits, lady. I appreciate that. When you're writing a story, you want to avoid speed bumps. So a speed bump, for those of you in chat that may not know, is too many difficult words, too many, like a weird character change or a personality change for your character, something that knocks the reader out of the story. You want to grab your reader, hook them in, and carry them along, be it a visual like a movie, a series, a book, whatever it is. You want to keep the reader or keep the audience engaged and drawn into your story going through. And you can have mini speed bumps that kind of make them put their head up and be like, oh, that's kind of strange. But if you have too many speed bumps, you can kick them out of your story entirely. And that's the thing with this Archie thing and this continuity thing that's now developed. They did a great job in the first 6 episodes. But this new continuity thing, to me, is a bit of a speed bump in the sense that we have... Like, I was watching this scene, and I had to go back and rewind the scene because my brain was just sitting there going, they're in a safe house. They're waiting. It's been days, conceivably, because we don't have a real sense of time in this series.
Yep.
Conceivably, it's been days. Did no one have... Like, they're eating, they're drinking. did no one have even a beer or a glass of water that they could wash Archie's neck off with?
I mean, they had to have had something because Grog was riddled with arrows.
Yeah. And healing doesn't take
So
away the bloodstains. So it takes away the wounds. So that was just what I'm talking about, where it's a speed bump, where I was so distracted by the fact that Archie was still bleeding and still had this blood running down his neck and still had these unchanged bandages, and he was sitting in a safe house. And to me, that was just a very, like, from a writer's perspective, that was a very problematic scene for me. And it really, like, it is small bones compared to what we're about to jump into, but it is something that does, it's a very good example of a speed bump that can throw your readers or your viewers out of your story. But then we do get to see a lot of relationship building with Keyleth and Vax in this. The whole will they, won't they is brought to somewhat of a head. And I appreciate, we're going to get to it, but I appreciate what they did with that scene. The follow-up I don't really understand, but we'll get to that. But there's a lot of things that just didn't seem to line up. So as they're running away from this horde of undead, and the Scanlan is just off on his own, just like, I'm afraid of the undead, I don't like them, they creep me out, I'm tasty, they're gonna eat me first. And then when they're safe house, he's kind of pacing back and forth doing this, and all of a sudden there's just like backhanded slap from Vex and telling him to smarten up. And it just seemed, to me at least, so out of place, so out of character. He wasn't hysterical, he wasn't going crazy, he was just kind of mumbling this thing to himself because he was stressed out. And that slap, well, I just, to me at least, seemed a little bit over the top.
yeah, I mean, I agree. Considering how well the characters have dealt with each other's problems, especially when it comes to their fears and their performances, it did seem a little bit out of the ordinary for Vex to really jump on top of Scanlan like that when she might be biting in her responses to Keyleth, but she's never been mean. She's never been like that extra step of like uncaring.
Yeah.
She always does it in a way that is, this isn't the right time, but you'll be fine. Like, get it together. And just the fact that she slapped him seemed like such an overstep, considering he wasn't bothering anyone.
Yeah, and he wasn't making noise. He wasn't going to bring anyone into them. It's like not like they were trying to be quiet for anything like that. And again, even for his reaction to that, where I understand there's thousands of the undead coming after you, but you've faced off against dragons, you've faced off against the Duke, you faced off against wraiths, you were carried away by a tentacled demon undead dog thing.
Yep.
And this is the reaction that he has to these things coming. So it's just, we're talking about last week, where you're taking a character and changing their personality to meet the trope or to meet the thing that you're going for, and it almost looks like it's bordering on Flanderization and that's something that I don't like, because there's so much about Scanlan. Like, if you're going to do Flanderization with Scanlan, you should do that with his sexuality and the tropes that he does and how sexual everything is with him and stuff like that, which they still do. But it seems like they're kind of taking this like Scooby-Doo, Shaggy, scared thing and really hitting that home and making that his character trait the past 2 episodes, which I really hope they bring to an end, because that's not who he is, and that's such a minor character trait of his. To make that become a preeminent character trait is really problematic.
Yeah, it's weird to take a character that is so bombastic like Scanlan and all of a sudden make him the one that's scared of everything. And I don't know if it's because Keyleth is kind of starting to come into her own and they just felt like they have need of someone to be fearful, or what the gameplay was for this. But you're right, it's out of place.
Yeah, it was. And for those of you who aren't aware, Flanderization of a character is when you take one character trait of the character and you continually build upon that and build upon it and build upon it until that becomes the main character. And it is actually named after Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, where he started off as one character, and then by the not the end, but later into the series, Flanders has become a caricature of one of his traits that he had. So that's what we're talking about when we say Flanderization. So that was kind of out of sorts. But I mean, to be fair, Scanlan was right, because he said they're going to come after me first. They know how tasty I am. I'm going to be the one they're going to get first. And immediately after he's slapped, he gets bit.
Yep.
And he is the first one out of the group to get bit. So like, he wasn't lying. He was bang on with that.
And his wound looks pretty nasty. That was a nasty wound.
Yeah, that was a pretty big chunk. And I do...
Yeah.
But then we go back to Vex, and she's writing character. She's like, well, it could be worse. How could it be worse? It could be my arm. That is bang on for Vex's character. Like something that she would say. So, yeah, it just seems strange, the shift that they did for some of these characters. But then they are... they're being attacked. The Horde comes in. Things go really sideways for them inside. If there's anything you think I'm missing, jump in and let me know if I'm skipping anything here. But then they have to leave the house, and the safe house, they go up through the roof. And that was something that I appreciated, because I said last week that not enough people are dying. Not enough people are being put into mortal danger. Yep. The thing with Scanlan, I didn't think he was going to die from it. But I was in this thing. I was like, "Oh, are they going to make him lose his arm?"
Right.
Like, that would be like, I actually finally I had a moment where I was like, "Oh, there's something really risky happening here, that could be really bad." And losing an arm or losing an eye is definitely a trope that happens in these kind of action things all the time, and it's tied up. Like if you look at all of these things, I almost gave away some spoilers for other shows that we discuss. But there are things that, even like in The Matrix and stuff like that this is a trope that we see.
Yeah, and I think it's really neat too, because as you said, this is something that we were looking for. Then this happens to a main character, and I can't remember if it's in the scene now or a future battle, but we see Scanlan having trouble casting magic or using his loot because of the injury. Yeah. Which like leads to this whole new thought of, we're going to see Scanlan do something new, because he's unable to do, he's got a serious injury here. And that made me very excited as well. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, it's weird to say that you're excited about someone getting injured and maimed and killed and stuff, but we needed it. We needed this to happen in this. But then they're being overrun by the Horde. Vex and Keyleth work together, where we get their kind of togetherness. So we get to see a little bit of the magic playing out between Vex and Keyleth, and we get to see a little bit more between Percy and Cassandra. With Cassandra being like, "Listen, you are the next leader, and you have to lead everyone," and him coming back being like, "No, Archie's the leader. I'm not." And that's where she says, "I've been with Briarwoods, no one trusts me. The next person who was supposed to be in line is dead, so it is you. You have to do something." And he still acquiesces and goes back and says, "No, it's Archie that needs to be leading everybody, because I ran away." So we do have this... The fact that he ran is addressed 2 or 3 times.
Kind of.
But without substance.
Yep.
Without depth. Even at the very end, we're jumping ahead for a moment, where it's like, they're going into the dungeons, and he's like, "I'm sorry I ran." And she's like, "I know, it's okay." It's like, well...
Yeah.
This is something you've been building up to. And that's where, as much as we said the past 2 episodes or 3 episodes were laying groundwork for what's to come. Last 2 episodes, I guess, laying the groundwork for what's to come for the rest of the season. And they were just doing a lot of groundwork laying. Now it just seems kind of like, okay, that part's done, let's move on. And it's just closed off too quick, and there was too much build up for no payoff, unless they're going to address it. And they're really starting to run out of runway on things that they need to address.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I almost feel like it's a little bit pandering to the audience at this point, because it's almost like we had the last couple episodes where, Cassandra was saying things and being kind of biting, like, you ran away. And we never got anything from them. And everyone complained, so they were like, all right, we'll have him respond in this episode. And that's all it was a response. without any character building, without anything that helped us progress in any way or made us feel like their characters had some kind of substantial growth. And I'm very disappointed with Cassandra's response, how she handled that, because she obviously was bothered by it. She was obviously bothered by the fact that her brother didn't come back, that he just ran away when she got shot with those arrows when they were fleeing Whitestone.
Well, she had a pretty sharp tongue on some of those notes.
Yeah, and she just accepts it. It
Yeah.
just reminds me of the whole I'm the Kestrel thing. Like, we had that note, we could have had some serious growth from it or had, some strife from it, and instead it just kind of flew away.
Yeah. And that's a really good point that you're bringing up that we haven't. I didn't want to. I was going to say this last episode, and I didn't want to, and I'll say it now because it's now 3 episodes in. Where after 6 episodes of a really good character arc, really good character development, except for Pike, and really good movement of things forward and getting to know everything, it has now fallen flat. Now there's barely any character development. The character development that is there is very much pandering to the audience. A little bit of stuff with Percy and learning a bit more about his backstory and that kind of stuff, and the Briarwoods now. But overall, there's not been a ton of character development. Like, we see Keyleth getting stronger still, but
Yep.
really to no end. We see Scanlan going off and trying his own thing, but for Vex and Vax, there hasn't been much of anything. There's this Keyleth Vex thing, or Vax thing, which is a little bit off. But and even for Grog and that kind of stuff, it seems like they focus so much on building out what's to come, laying groundwork, and putting in action that they've completely taken their foot off the gas when it came to character arc and character development.
Yeah, and I think it's a disservice too, because part of what made the first 6 episodes so good was the character development, because it was just seamlessly sewn into what was going on around them. And to have all these characters that we really liked, like we liked Scanlan, we liked Grog, we liked the twins, and to have them all of a sudden, I wouldn't even say playing second fiddle, they're playing like sixth fiddle, and we're not getting anything else from them, and even the characters we're focusing on, like, it's just kind of petering out. And I think the characters are the strongest part of this. Their relationships are what made it so interesting at the beginning,
Yeah.
and how they relied on each other and supported each other was what made it great. And now it's getting kind of tropey.
It is. It really is. And it seems less, because it was in the beginning, it seemed very much like you can tell where the roll of the die was and how things actually happened on the table. You're not seeing that as often anymore. Now it just seems kind of like, okay, we've got the story to a point. Now we have to make it something, and they're falling into the tropes and to missteps and with their in the writer's room and how they're doing things. And to be clear, for people that have just maybe joining us for the first time, we are not trying to dump all over the Legend of Vox Machina. We absolutely love the show. We sound a little bit more critical tonight in the last episode or two, just because they set the bar so high, and then they've been limboing for the past 3 episodes, which is really shocking. That they've just been walking under the bar and not reaching the promise that they made to us at the beginning, which they held through for 6 episodes. And now it's just this, it's kind of shocking that these are the missteps. So when we're talking about missteps, we're talking about things we don't like and things that have changed. It's not that it's a badly written show. It's not that we don't like it. It's that it's off target and off brand of what it typically is. And that's kind of shocking. And that's why we're discussing it at length.
Yeah, to go into it even further, I actually had a chance to sit down and watch the whole series when it came out, and I enjoyed watching the series. There was no part of me that was like, this is a bad series, or I'm gonna have plenty to talk about because X, Y, and Z was wrong. These are just talking points that have come up from multiple viewings and looking at it critically to find the small things to discuss.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're doing, is we're breaking it down. And I love the series. I'm definitely going to go back and rewatch it again. And this is a series that I'm going to rewatch multiple times.
Absolutely.
And because they're only 25-minute, half-hour episodes, that's what, 6 hours. That's something you can do in an afternoon. You can sit down and watch, like, binge the entire thing. and just really enjoy yourself. Or on a night that you can't sleep, or if you're sick or something, that's a great thing to just spend 6 hours, hit play, and just let it run through, and you'll have a blast. But then, so we do see three, and then as they're escaping, they're going up to the hatch, we see 3 or 4 of them die. One gets pulled back off the ladder. One gets attacked and doesn't make it to the ladder. Like, we actually see it's not the core group of Vox Machina, but the rebellion is now starting to lose ranks.
Yeah, at least someone's dying.
Yeah, and to the point that they get up onto the rooftop, and there's someone from the rebellion has this comment of, "Whitestone isn't worth this." And that's when Cassandra's like, they're losing faith. And again, she's like, "Percy, you have to step up." Or that's the first time she's like, "You have to step up and do something." And Percy says no. But they do bring a point up, which was interesting to me. And that's when Keyleth looks at Scanlan's arm. And she actually says, "I'm not Pike. This is beyond me." So that is saying that she does have healing capabilities. Whether or not it's magical healing or it's tincture. I mean, she did use some magic with the tincture, I guess, when she saved Cassandra. So that's something that... So maybe that is the missing clue, because we kept asking, how in the hell is the entire group getting healed constantly? Maybe it was Keyleth doing something, using a poultice that acted really fast.
Maybe, but that just leads me again to the question of, why aren't they helping poor Archie, who's bleeding from his head wound?
Yeah, and what is her limitation? If she can heal Grog riddled with 36 arrows, then how can she not heal Archie? How can she not heal these other things? And again, I think that little line, I can see that as a line being like, "Oh yeah, by the way, she does have healing powers." And it's like, well, that kind of clouds the issue even worse, because now I just have more questions than I did walking into it. Before, it was just a matter of, wow, you guys are really overlooking this whole thing, and everyone's coming out clean and crystal at the end of all of this, after all the battles. But now you're telling me that you do have a healer, but she's just not that powerful. And then now my head is just full of other questions, which is, again, another speed bump moment. Because now I'm sitting there, my head is spinning with, well, what can she heal? What can't she heal? And all these other things. Yeah. So that was definitely an interesting spot. Then we have Cass with the thing saying that it's necrosis and you'll lose the arm within the hour. And a beautiful exchange between Grog and Scanlan.
Yep. I mean, it's been said so many times over the weeks, but Grog and Scanlan have the best one-liners, and especially their chemistry together is it's a beautiful thing to watch, and this was no different.
Yeah, exactly. You want me to whack it off? I might need you to. And the fact that Grog, they're having these, and it's not even to them, it's not even one-liners. They're having a conversation, but Grog is talking about his arm, Scanlan is thinking about his junk, and they're, the conversation flows, but there's 2 different angles at it, and neither one is picking up on what the other is saying on that. Which is beautifully done and beautifully written. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then another part that I liked is then we see them running across the rooftop. Beautiful scene. The silhouettes of them running through the rooftops is very nice. It's reminiscent of something that I don't remember. But the part that I liked about it is you can hear the cries from the town or the village of people being attacked. It's not just them being chased by this undead horde, which is what it's always been to this point.
Yep.
Apart from the fact that you see the one guy step out of the shop and he's a zombie. We've seen a couple of townsfolk being attacked by zombies, like with that scene of Scanlan at the last episode. But we can actually, they take a moment, they take a beat to be like, this is the scale of things. And it's not just them under threat. The entire city or town is being attacked by this undead horde. And you can hear these cries for help echoing through the streets. There's a beautiful, beautiful scene for that. And then they get attacked in the alley after Keyleth says, "Let's live here forever." And then they get attacked by giants and the Duke, which we said, you have to see your enemy die. Especially even when you're dealing with the Briarwoods. Even if they're dead, it doesn't matter. but you have to see your enemy die. You can't leave them dying because they will come back and put a sword through the back of your throat.
Yeah, surprise, surprise, the Duke didn't die. Who could have called that?
I mean, to be fair, there's some tropes you're going to do, and there's some tropes you're going to have
Yeah,
going
absolutely.
through. Like, that's because if you have a show that has zero tropes, then
Do you have a show?
yeah, they're comforting. They're things that,
Yep.
especially if it's something new, it's something that people can go, oh, okay, I've been down this path before. I know what this path generally leads to. Are they going to do that? And you're not leaving the viewer constantly guessing about the story. You're giving them some form of comfort as you go through. But if you rely too heavy on tropes, then it just becomes silly and
Sure.
absurdist. What would you think of the Percy's new pepper box that he pulls out?
Ah, yes. So we've actually already seen this tool. This is, I believe, the bad news which he pulled out to kind of spy on. I can't remember if it was the Duke or I think it may have been Anders in the building where
That's true.
he saw where Cassandra was hidden. So we just actually got to see it in use this time.
In use. And apparently his lens alignment is off. 'Cause he had a pretty squared up shot at the giant's head and then blew off his shoulder.
It's called the bad news for a reason.
And of course, the barrel blows out, but what a blast that came off of that. And that wasn't even a supercharged.
Yeah.
That was just pulling the trigger and seeing what hell is
battle.
unleashed. Yeah, it was pretty impressive.
I mean, I really like just the use of that. I like that, he was up against dire straits and he pulled that out and was like, step back. I thought all that was fine. And I like that they explain, like, he says, oh, it's blown out. It was only going to be one shot. So then you don't have to continually think, well, why isn't he using the awesome gun?
Yeah, exactly. Where you could just blow everybody away with it. Well, that, and I like the fact that, like, there's, again, things that you need to explain sometimes, and there's some tropes that you can do. And one thing I love is taking a trope and then twisting it.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that slightly with this, where Vax, he's digging through the bag, and Vax is like, I don't mean to rush you, and his response is, then don't. It's just, it was just a quick snap, but it was just like, oh, they're going through that. Oh, okay, that trope, that ended pretty quick. Okay. But and it comes out, and then of course Grog's reaction was amazing. Grog had so many wonderful reactions in this episode. That's one thing I have to give it. Like, it's just been awesome. Like, at that point where it's like, let's kill fucking everything. Like, yes, Grog. But yeah, and then we have they decide to regroup at the Sun Tree, and the Duke has other plans for Scanlan.
Yeah, I'm blanking on
The
what
giants,
you're talking about.
They see the giants because the giants have come down the street, and the Duke is with them. They decide to disperse and regroup at the Sun Tree, and then one of the giants grabs the roof off of one of the houses, throws it as a barricade, and blocks Scanlan from running away, and then he faces off against the Duke. And the Duke says, "Did you not think that I would adapt and overcome from our last meeting?" And Scanlan's like,
Right.
"No, I didn't." Because Scanlan tries to use the crotch shot again, and that doesn't work. But we do have the Scanlan trying to play off all gnomes looking the same.
Yeah. Speaking of tropes.
Exactly. And again, like, they don't have a lot of racism in this show. But the stuff that they do is done very tropey, where all giants can speak the same language. And just because they're a giant, he knows how to communicate with them for Grog. And all gnomes look the same, so, like, you've got me mistaken. That's this wonderful little thing that they did. But again, even with that, I felt they could have played that out a little bit more. Added more attention to it. It was pretty quickly done. As a sword swing breaks through the roof, Scanlan runs away.
So, I mean, I would argue that I forgive them on this case, just because there's a lot happening. There's been a lot of action in this episode, and they're obviously trying to shove in a lot of little interactions. Um, could they have done a better job maybe picking and choosing which of these interactions actually happen now, or
Yeah.
maybe didn't need to be at all? Probably, and that would have given more time for the interaction between the Duke and Scanlan. But I forgive him for this. I feel like this isn't what detracts from the episode.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really detract from the episode. I think for me it was probably more of the in this scene, except for Scanlan's comment with all gnomes look alike, I found
Yep.
the dialogue kind of fell a little bit flat for me in this. I think
Sure.
there could have been a stronger dialogue between the Duke and Scanlan going through for
Yeah,
what they've gone
I
through.
can agree with that.
It was a little bit off, but I mean, again, there's so much that they had to deal with. But then they're fighting, and the giants are going out. Duke is going out, and Scanlan runs away. He's injured. His arm is still doing its thing and dying on his body. And Archie decides to
Yep.
run in and save Scanlan from the Duke, because Scanlan really has nothing. He can't. And that was the other thing too. Was I know he doesn't need to use his loot for everything for his magic, but we just had him saying, like, what a time for performance issues because he can't play the lute. And then, without thinking, he uses his crotch magic to blast at the Duke.
Yeah.
Which I know is two different types of the magic, but it also brings the question of, does he not, like, how does he regain his energy and strength?
Yeah, I think that is a big question, and definitely something that is worthy of explanation in some kind of way. Just because I hate to think that the crotch magic, the crotch shot was, just a shove in, and that there was no real explanation to why or how he could do that other than lip service, which is why I loved it.
Yeah.
But when you get into the scene and all of a sudden he's having performance issues and he's unable to use magic or do something, I just wish that there was more to it. We can see that his arm's injured, but is it more than that? Like, if he popped a Viagra, would he be able to use magic? Like, I don't understand, and I wish that I did, and it just went by so fast. Again, I think that it was cool that they finally had someone get injured and it affected how they
Yeah.
performed. That's what I wanted. That's what I want to see. But after the scene, after an episode that we just saw where he was able to do something without his hands, maybe we could get a little explanation of how his magic's working.
Yeah, because that's a big thing, and that was the thing that kind of left me questioning was how does his magic work? And it's,
Yeah.
I mean, I like the fact, like, I do like the line where it's like, you didn't think that I would adapt, and it's kind of like, no.
Very cool. Yeah.
Like, that was a funny moment. Actually, I had like a laugh out loud moment for that. But again, yeah, it's just added kind of more questions and some confusion to what they were doing with it. But then, yeah, so we do see Scanlan in real trouble, and this was one of those moments still where I thought, something is maybe going to happen to Scanlan because,
Yeah. This is
the
it.
Duke is pissed. They've got 3 or 2 giants at this point. How are they going to get away, and what are they going to do? And then the Duke is coming in for the killing blow, and Archie decides to run in and try to save the day.
Very selfless, very Archie. It was the right thing for him to do in his mind and heart, and he did it without thinking. And the outcome was unfortunate, but it's the final kick in the pants that Percy needed to witness in order for him to decide, oh, I should stand up instead of running away again.
Yeah, and when we talk about inciting incidents and things like that, and like Dark Night of the Soul for characters, I think everyone thought the Dark Night of the Soul for Percy was going to be with Cassandra dying, which turned out the way it turned out. And that was this. This was the kick in the pants. This was the moment of, we don't really have that downbeat a very long downbeat for him to kind of think about it and have like a mentor being like, hey, listen buddy, you can do this. He kind of
Yep.
goes through that whole mentor talk. Like, he's been getting the mentor talk from a variety of people through the entire series, and
Yep.
it kind of clicks finally with him that I am like, I've been saying all the way along that this is my revenge and I need to be the one to do something about it. Well, then I damn well better step up and do something about it to make this
Yeah.
work.
And it was like finally, like I feel like his refusal to kind of get on the path was a little bit drawn out, compared to how quickly everything else seemed to get resolved and pushed around throughout the series. But we do get to see it, and I like that. We got to see that emotion. We got to see him like have resolve and make that mental decision and then step forward.
Yeah, kind of go through a burst of maturity as he steps up.
Yeah,
But the
exactly.
conversation that he had with Archie kind of confused me because they're
Sure.
joking with each other before Archie is bisected. We had this
Yeah.
conversation where Archie's like, this just like the good old times. So Archie's talking about the good old times, and then they have this quip back and forth, and then Percy says something along the lines of, well, I did stop a smelly son of a cook from getting executed. And Archie says, well, I thought I heard some sniveling person like whelp looking at me through the bars or something like that, or I saw someone looking at me through the bars. Is that something from their past, or is that from when he saved Archie from the Duke?
So I can't remember if it is in the episode. I think when they actually. So I can't remember what exact episode it is, but when Percy finds out that Archie's the one that's been leading the revolution, there's a very quick conversation where Percy explains to the group that Archie was his best friend growing up, and they used to get in all kinds of trouble, and that and there was some kind of minor mention of them getting in trouble in the kitchens and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the full story was at the table and we just kind of missed it, or if it just wasn't explained very well. But there is a backstory that I'm sort of familiar with, and I don't know if it's from that episode or not.
See, that's what confused me, because there's that episode where he talks about all the trouble that they were getting into and who Archie was to
Yep.
him and all this other stuff. And then the Duke, like, he's in prison. He's about to be executed and tortured. He's being tortured and about to be killed by the Duke and by Enders. Or
Yep.
by Stonefell. And so that was my thing. It was like, when it's a completely pedantic point, but when he says,
Yep.
I saved you from being executed, was that something from their childhood that they got into, or is that something from when he just like 2 days ago saved him from being executed by Stonefell?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point that kind of escaped me just because of prior knowledge. So
Yeah. So for me, it was
yeah.
just one of those speed bump things again, where I was just like, okay, well,
Absolutely.
I should be watching the episode, and now I'm wondering, is there like a part of a backstory that I should be more aware of? That is because it would be cool. I like those two characters together. I love the interactions that all the characters have with each other. They play off each
Absolutely.
other very well, and that's where things, And I the one thing that I would say is Archie's death could have been more impactful. I don't think they did enough justice of showing how much they meant to each other, how much Percy we see the impact of it on Percy, and we kind of get to like, oh wow, that's like you've kind of unleashed the beast on this one. But I didn't have this like, oh no, Archie's dead. I was kind of like, oh okay, Archie's dead, let's move on. They could have tied that. They could have created more of an emotional tie-in. But again, we're on a tight timeline, and there is so much stuff that needs to get crammed into this series.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is that they decided to make these 25, 30-minute episodes, and we didn't get enough of the character building with some of the secondary characters. And it's too bad too, because I agree, if we had a better understanding of their relationship, then that would have made it a very traumatic scene and would have really helped solidify dragging Percy through his story arc by having such a punctuated ending to it.
Yeah.
So I completely I completely get you there.
Yep. But we do have. So when after Archie is cut in half, because that's the big thing that I did pick up on this is Percy was, and they kind of put an exclamation mark on Percy's comment with this because
Yep.
when Cass is saying, "Listen, you have to lead us," and Percy's response is, "No, Archie's the leader. I've been gone. I'm not. I'm not the one." And then Archie is cut in half, and now it's well, you know. And then we actually hear the call because in the beginning of the episode we hear them saying, you know, this isn't worth it, and Whitestone's not worth this, and they're starting to lose resolve. And then Archie gets cut in half, and then you hear echoing across the battlefield, "Fall back," like kind of disperse, stop, and that kind of punctuates for Percy being that like, I have to step in now. If I don't step in, everything is going to come crashing down around my ears. So he does take that step up and become the leader that he kind of wanted to be, like unknowingly, but this was this thing, like he wanted to come in and take charge and take control and to stop the Briarwoods and get back Whitestone. How are you going to do that if you're not leading them?
Yeah, he kind of wanted to just do it from the shadows by himself, I guess. But this was really the true calling, as you say, to this whole ordeal.
Exactly. So they're trying to flee, and then Keyleth. That's one thing that I said last episode. I was afraid that they were going to make Keyleth waver again and become this like little mousy person. Like, I don't know if I can do this or not. But she really, you know, there's a hordes coming at them again, and she just steps forward and is like, "I've got this. Everyone step back." And so they're still building her confidence, but they're not overbuilding her confidence, which is huge.
Yeah, and she blows out a giant burst of magic that just kind of stops the battle in its tracks, and is really impressive. And it really leads to some questionable decisions by a certain member of the party, but
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I have to say is, of all the character arcs, and I'm really shocked that I'm saying this, I think Keyleth is the best one that's been developed. I think they have handled Keyleth's emotions, her character arc, and everything to do with her the best. And it's been the smoothest transition. It's on pace. It's not too fast. It's not too slow. It's not aggressive. It's not like, you know, they could have a couple of slide backs, but they did have some slide backs. And at this point, I don't think, like I said, I wouldn't want to see any real slide backs unless there is something major, because she's built up a pretty good level of confidence. There is one character that they just jumped off a cliff with developing their character arc, which we're going to get into in a moment. But Keyleth, I think they absolutely, like, that's kind of picture perfect character development is what they're doing with Keyleth.
Yeah, honestly, I'm really impressed with what they did with Keyleth. I feel like they did a better job kind of painting her character in this than they even had at the table. Like, I think that they did a brilliant job really showing how she matures and how the group nurtures her and gets her to come out of her shells. And definitely bravo to the team for that.
Yeah, definitely. The one that I think I'm the most disappointed in is Vex. Vex has almost zero character growth through this.
Yep.
She stays the same all the way through. In this episode, there was 1 point of character growth where she kind of gives over the reins of power. But other than that, Vex is still who she was at the beginning now.
She's still Vex.
Yeah. And maybe there's a reason for that. That is yet to be seen, but there just really has not been like her perspective, her responses to people, the way she deals with things, the way she deals with situations, even the fact with Vax and Keyleth, there's still the same.
So I would argue that although we're seeing this as a season of a television show, this really wasn't that much time in comparison to the entire campaign that happened. And there is a lot that we have yet to see or haven't seen. So it doesn't surprise me that we haven't had a character arc of some type for every single character. It doesn't surprise me that Grog's being left in the dust or that Vex hasn't changed at all, because those characters' beats just happened at different times. It never felt like a character was really entangled or combined with another character's story. That being said, I hope the fact that there is going to be multiple seasons leads to more character development, and the fact that they know there's going to be more seasons leads to them adding more hinted at character development, so it's not so one-sided.
Well, that's it. And I get that, but I still think that there should be some level of moving through. Like Grog's character, like you said, left in the dust, kind of when Pike left, that kind of left Grog floundering. And Grog is still who Grog is as well. But I think that there could have been some level, even if just subtle changes in attitude, personality. That doesn't have to be a big thing, but just even a subtle tweak. And there's still time for it to come through. But those are two that are kind of standing out to me.
Not much.
Yeah, but those are two, like with Grog as well, where I'm kind of like, okay, well, this doesn't really, and Vex as well. Like Vex doesn't have a ton of character development. His character development more is on the romantic side, where he's opening up, he's softening, and he's developing feelings for another member of the team.
Right, which is interesting, I think, to have a character in this kind of ensemble who really has just been a romantic foil, and his use has been really only for supporting Keyleth up to this point. He's had a little bit of interaction with his sister, and he's got some playful banter with some of the other party members, but his use really has only been to give doe eyes at Keyleth and give words of encouragement. Yeah,
to build her up and to develop her character arc.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point for that. But she does, without hesitation, she throws up this wall of ice, she stops them, they get back to the Sun Tree and regroup, and that's again where we see Cass saying to Percy, you have to lead us, and Percy kind of clicking in, and then he has, I put down here again, like it's not, they don't address the running away again. It's just, like you said, she's completely turned a corner from being snippy and snide, and I mean, they're in a battle, so you can understand a little bit, but and maybe that is part of the snide, for being like, you have to like wake up, you have to be the one to do this. And then he does give this rousing speech to get everyone going, and that I think was actually a well-phrased, well-worded speech. I like that from a writing perspective. It got the blood boiling and pumping, and Grog, so let's fucking murder everything.
It's great, yeah.
Yeah, it was a perfect punctuation to what Percy's speech was.
I think they definitely make Percy very eloquent. I think that every time that he has center stage, the things that he says really resonate. It's his interpersonal interaction that I think has been lacking for that character, and just the lack of developing the people around him, Archie and Cassandra and things like that leave a sour taste in my mouth, because whenever he's center stage, like, the writing for him is brilliant.
Yeah, no, and he is a great character. It's just falls short in some things. But then the giants and the horde break the ice wall, and they're once more outnumbered, and that's where Scanlan says he has performance issues. So I got it reversed. So it's actually before. So Scanlan does do the crotch shot, but to be fair, it wasn't a blast. It wasn't like this big poof that he had before. It was kind of like a little electric zap that came out, like an electric shock.
Boop.
Yeah, and it really fell flat. So maybe that was a thing of like, okay, well, this is the performance issues. But then he's trying to do something, and you see now his arm is blistered up, and you can see the necrosis really. Like, I think they did a great job at showing the progression of the necrosis, which shows that they've got that attention to detail, which makes Archie all the worse. They could have done something to Archie.
They've showed that attention to detail, which is, I think, what frustrates me, is that they've had that attention to detail early in the episodes.
Yeah. Like, it's the second half of the season is not reflective of what the first half of the season was so far. Mm-hmm. It's almost like they changed writers halfway through.
Yeah. Was there a writer strike?
There was close to one, I think, but no, there wasn't. And then they do, so talking about the fact that sometimes you have a trope and you have to address it, or you have something that's done and you have to address it, is good. but it causes some confusion. It can cause some confusion as well. And that's what I like with this, where we have this moment with Vax and Keyleth, where Vax is like, you do know that I'm in love with you, right? And Keyleth's reaction is like, wait a minute, now? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? This is the worst possible time. And then she runs off. Now, the part where I was confused by that, so that's where it's calling it out. Like, so there's a trope of, like, in the worst possible time, someone's professing their love, and then, like, almost leaning in for the kiss, and the other person, we actually have the hit on the hammer, or the hit on the nail of, like, the hell's wrong with you? Like, you had all this time leading up to this to tell me this. We're in the middle of the thick of things, and now you're saying it. And where I got confused, and this could be from the next episode, I don't know, but Vex looks at Vax and says, see, I told you that rose had thorns. I think it's in the next episode.
That's the next episode, yeah.
But that's where I was confused with that, because nothing that Keyleth did was thorny. And she hasn't done anything to hurt him or go out of her way to be cold to him or anything like that. Everything's moving along rather rapid fire, and they're still in the thick of things. So I'm a little confused as to where the thorns are.
I think that is something we'll probably talk about in the next episode.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get to that then. Well, what do you think of that love profession and the response?
I think out of all the things that were happening in this episode, that felt the most shoehorned in. I think the trope is fine. It's not one of the like really played out ones that makes me like wince and roll my eyes. But we had so much going on that wasn't that maybe could have had a little more time given to it. And instead we got that weird rejection, and it was just silly. I don't particularly have a problem with it. I thought that Keyleth's reaction to it was right. Like, I was honestly afraid that because they were leaning in for the kiss, I was really afraid that was going to happen. I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But to have her react as she did, I was like, all right, well, at least they did that right.
Yeah, they did. And that's the thing. But the thing that bothered me with it, too, like you said, it was shoehorned in, and they spent, like, I know it wasn't a ton of time, but I'm going to say too much time building up to it in this episode. Everything was a slow burn. And then in this episode, it was like doe eyes, little comments, you're awesome, you're this, you're that, to the point where Vex is like, yeah, she's the tits, let's go. Like, they keep going. I really appreciated that scene. But again, there was just so much time and energy put into this thing that really had nothing to do with this episode. Yeah, this could have been held off for when they're in the dungeon. Or anything else.
You know, I was thinking all that time that they were spending waiting for Scanbo or anything else where they had downtime. It seemed silly when it happened. But that's neither here nor there.
And to me, it was also this thing of like, well, were you waiting to see if she was going to come into her own before you told her how you felt for her? Or because it wasn't until she does this like massive burst of magic, and is that like, all right, is he attracted to her or is he attracted to power? Like, what was it that made him finally like flip that switch and be like, oh, I have to tell you? Beyond the fact that they were probably all going to die right away. And conceivably, they should have died all the way. Or right away, because we have Percy and we have Vax standing on the sun tree. They've climbed up as far as they can. The sun tree is surrounded. They've got giants. They've got the Duke is dead. We missed that. The Duke had a beautiful ending where Percy just blows out his knee and then lets the townsfolk take care of him, that was gorgeous.
Very poetic.
Yeah, poetic justice. I loved it. But they're surrounded by all this stuff. The days come to its end. Vax and Percy have this moment of, it's been an honor fighting with you. And then I flipped the table. Exactly what I said. I did not. Both things. Last episode, I said two things I did not want to see happen. One, the townsfolk come in and take over the battle and save the day. And two, biggest of all, Pike suddenly appearing and saving the day. They did both. And the one that I was afraid of most of all, they hit that with a giant shining spotlight.
Yeah. So
Even my daughter agrees.
again, yeah, I mean, I hear. Um, so this is technically what happened at the table. As we mentioned in other episodes, Ashley Johnson had other engagements. She had a job that she was doing, and she was taken away for a period of time. And when she did get to come back, occasionally they had to find interesting ways to get her back in the scene. That not being the case for this animation, I was really hoping, I was assuming they were going to do something with it, because there's no reason, considering we have no way to know how much time has gone by in any instance, there's no reason why she couldn't have just traveled back to Whitestone and joined the party. Doesn't take away the fact that, she shows up and saves the day, but at least it wouldn't have been astral projection.
Yeah. I mean, they had fun with it with Grog, poking at her and being like, "You're glowy and buzzy. Are you dead?" That was cool. Like that, there were some neat parts with it, but having her come down, land through the middle of the giant, splitting him in half, and then blasting out. So she ends up taking out 3 waves of these creatures, and
Yep.
so I'm gonna try not to rant on this, but the 3 things that I had, there's some major problems that I had in this. One of them being the jump in her character arc. She went from a pretty good character arc until she had to leave, and then it was just, I can't find the Everlight. Or I can't reach the Everlight. What's wrong? I can't reach the Everlight. What's wrong? Well, it's not within you. It's not, it's whatever. And it's like, oh, it is within you. You're lying. But you're lying to yourself. And her whole thing is, I'm supposed to be this holy paladin doing all this wonderful stuff, and I like drinking, I like fighting and brawling in bars, I like going out and doing these things. And then the Everlight is like, no, that's cool. You're with your friends, they are doing the same thing, and you can still be holy and still go tear it up and cause some problems. And then from the end of that, where we see her struggling and trying to break free from being in this burst of flame and learning this stuff at the end of the last episode, to the next instant, like they had ended the last episode of the group of the goddesses, well, like the people at the temple, saying, if she can't get out of this on her own, like, we can't do anything, she has to get out of this on her own, and we leave her in this really dangerous spot of like what's going to happen to her and all that. And the very next instance we have, she astral projects into the middle of a battle scene, kicks ass, wipes out everybody, and has a mouth of a sailor saying, let's kill these motherfuckers and let's fucking do this. And what was the one thing that she says where she, I've got it down, let's crush some fucking heads. So the Everlight is like, no, it's cool, you can go kill stuff. And she's like, gloves are off, baby. And she comes in and is just swearing more than she has before. She's more aggressive than she was before. And it is such a dichotomy character shift for her, especially from where we left her in that last episode. She's way more powerful than she ever was. Like, we never saw her wake up out of the coma. And now she comes in this, like, is she still in the coma doing this? Like, how does she all of a sudden have her power amplified by 1,000 times from one conversation with the Everlight that we left her still struggling to try to figure out what was happening? And then she comes out completely breaking the rules of what she was saying to the Everlight that she was concerned about. It just seemed like such a drastic jump off a cliff. And then she comes in and saves the day. That whole thing just really, I did not like that at all. That was the biggest issue with me for this episode.
Yeah, that was definitely my biggest disappointment, but I'm even gonna take it a step further in what I'm gonna criticize with it. Yeah, she came back. She was all powerful. She astro projected. Great. What I didn't like is that she came back and just healed Scanlan's arm, and everything was fine.
Just with a touch.
So the only time that we had a character that I felt like had some kind of grievous injury where we actually had to consider what was happening just got wiped out 10 minutes later by someone astral projecting.
And she doesn't
Put
even
to bed.
acknowledge it. She just lands, touches him, and keeps talking.
Yep. I was just like, okay.
Yeah. That was a table flipping scene for me. Like, that was just a really frustrating, and that was the spot where, for the first time ever in this entire series, I'll come out and say, that was bad writing, poor decision making, and a poorly written scene to do it the way they did it.
Like I said, I don't understand why they didn't change this part of the story. There was no reason why they couldn't have written her character Pike back into the story. There's no reason why her part of the arc could have happened in the first couple episodes, and then she could have been traveling for the past few episodes, and then she comes and joins the group and helps them with the struggle instead of being omnipotent.
Yeah.
My concern is that she just did this wonderful thing. She's like super magical, like demigod type thing. And now either she's going to be a demigod for the rest of Vox Machina, or she's not. And I think both are not good.
Yeah, they're both highly problematic. And I mean, then this comes down to the scene at the end of Wheel of Time, where it's like, well, if, Egwene could heal all this time and do this stuff, and if it just took like 5 sisters channeling, or not even like no sisters, just 5 wildings channeling, and wipes out an entire freaking army, then what the hell's the point of the dragon? What's the point of all this stuff? What's the point of why don't they just send Pike ahead to astral project into where they are and then blast the hell out of everything and they're all good, right? They made her way too powerful, and this scene could have worked. This scene could have been beautiful. I like what this scene overall could have been. They did not build up to it at all. Like I said, it was just, oh, woe is me. Oh, woe is me. I'm lost. I'm confused. I'm here to kick everyone's ass. Yep. And I'm much more powerful than it was. So they took her storyline from here and they brought it to here. In a very brief, like way too quick of a thing. There should have been at least some form of struggle or some form of her, like even a moment to try to explain something, like anything. It was just a night and day difference.
They could have even had just a brief conversation with the Everlight saying, I'm going to lend you my power for something. Like, just something to explain it, because she's just a god now.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, she is now the most powerful person in that group. And that's confusing to me. That, like, again, like someone who had no story arc, and then all of a sudden they become the most powerful person in the group. Like, that, for the writing perspective, is hugely problematic. And I think they could have done it better, and they could have definitely have her come back much more powerful than she was, because that's what happens, right? You go off on a side quest, you come back with new abilities. But we didn't get to see any of her build up to those abilities. We saw 2 trial and fails, two try fail cycles when she's going to the meditation and trying to get through. Maybe 3 when she's with at the temple. And again, like, to go from that to a god character is so problematic, because there should have been something of, a risk of her power faltering, or yes, I'm here, but I'm still so far away. My power isn't as strong as it is, so I can like maybe come in and like blast everything out, but I can't wipe out wave after wave after wave with my golden mace and then light up everyone else's swords.
Right.
Which we're going to get to that as well.
What I think is too bad is that visually, this was really cool.
Yeah, it was like, it could have been an amazing scene.
If narratively it made sense, it would have been so awesome.
Yeah, it definitely would have. And it could have tied in so much better, but that's what we've been saying all the way along, is that they were really either give Pike a storyline or leave her out of it.
Yep.
Yeah, it even would have been better if she had have left and then come back in this blaze of glory with nothing in between.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this whole, like, the next couple of episodes, couple of flashbacks, conversations, dialogue on what
Find
happened
out what
to her,
happened.
right?
Yep. Absolutely.
But to lay it out the way they did, and to limp her storyline along, and all of a sudden come down like the hammer of God on this was just it was miswritten. It wasn't planned out well. But I can see the issue with it, because that is a big thing, especially, again, for those of you who don't know, there is a lot in this canon, in this universe, that has been crammed down into this one series, this one season. So in a writer's room, or when you're writing something like that, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things moving, flying past you really quickly. And if you've got something that's this hard, that's a character that disappears for a while and has to come back in, it can be really hard to reintroduce. I think the thing that bothers me so much with it is the fact that there's been so many missteps over the past 3 episodes. And then with this one, it was just kind of like, okay, come on. What is happening? And actually, for those of you who don't know, like obviously none of you know, I went onto our messaging system when I saw that halfway. I actually paused this episode and I sent Billy and LJ a message. I'm like, come on! Seriously? Because I was so frustrated by it. But it's what happened, and we'll see if they can save it from here moving forward. They may have something up their sleeve that we are yet to know about.
I still have faith.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. That's the thing that I find is most shocking, is that after doing so well for so long, that these missteps, I'm kind of like, okay, what is happening? Why, like, did your lead writer get sick and they couldn't come in for a while? Like, what happened for these 3 episodes? I'm really hoping that the next episodes aren't going to be like this, that they're going to pick up and move forward. But then we do have that moment of her coming back, where they do have this pause of Scanlan proposing to her. And her response of, yeah, let's do it right now. Really? No. And then Grog crushing her in this thing. He's like, you glow and you buzz. Are you dead?
Again, because the relationships that they have with each other are wonderful and the best part of their characters. Yeah. So, of course, those reunions were so good.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And I like the fact that they didn't... See, I could say that I'm torn, that they didn't make it an emotional thing, but I'm kind of happy they didn't, because there wasn't room for emotion in this scene, in this episode.
Yep.
The fact that they kept because they've had moments where Grog is emotional, and they've been really touching it and really like bring a tear to your eye, and they could have done a really cool thing with this, but they didn't. They kept it to tone with what was happening, and I think that was a really good call. And again, not saying that this entire scene was poorly written or that it was bad writing for this. Just that entrance and what her abilities now, like her character arc, is what I take issue with the writing for. But she explains that it's astral projection, and then she makes her mace glow and wipes out a second wave. Like the entire wave.
She sure does.
Of things coming through. Which confuses me. But that catches the attention of Silas and Delilah. And that's where Silas is saying, I'm going to the front. And that's where Delilah says, and risk everything. You're far too valuable. We just have to accelerate our plans. So that kind of does give more credence to the mystery of what's happening, what's going on with them. And the fact that Silas still doesn't fully understand what's going on. He is in the dark of all this stuff. And we see that she still has the scar on her forearm.
Yeah, I find that very interesting, because if you think back to all the other episodes that we've seen with her in it, she's usually wearing the long gloves. So I thought it was very cool to be able to see, oh, hey, look, she still has the scar from that thing that she did however many years ago.
Yeah. At first, my reaction to that was kind of like, okay, why is she taking the glove off? He knows it's there. That's kind of like a show don't tell. Or like it was a show don't tell and a kind of a bit of an info dump. It struck me at first as kind of an info dump. But then I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? No, it's not. Because if you've got someone that's got like this, for example, like a little dagger, that's this magical little dagger, and this is going to be the thing that's going to solve everything, then even though everybody in the party knows they have it, then that's one of those things that, or, you know, like a magical gun or something, that's going to be the thing where it's like, you know what? We need to up our game. you're going to brandish that thing. You're going to show the source of your power. You're going to be like, remember, we're still like, yeah, they've got this big glowy ball thing going down there that we don't quite know what it is yet, but we've got this. So let's keep going. So at first I was like, why did they take her glove off? That seems weird and fits in weird. But it's like, no, it makes sense. It's something that would happen. I think I can totally excuse that for that. But then, oh no, sorry, the Duke is still alive.
This is when he gets shot.
When he gets killed. There's so much happened in this episode. I'm conflating Scanlan's storyline. I'm conflating the Duke's storyline. So sorry, Chad, the Duke isn't dead yet, and we didn't mention how he died.
So then...
But we do have this, again, this kind of very reminiscent of Lord of the Rings, Gimli and Legolas, where they are counting how many people they've killed and during the battle. And we have Vax do arrow jumps to jump on top of a giant, and then we have Grog getting the now healed Scanlan to use Scanlan's hand to give him a lift up onto the other giant.
Fastball special.
Yeah, and then they do the... Like, could they have gone more grotesque with Vax?
Yeah, it was pretty gross.
Like, this is reminiscent of the barfing in the BF episode 1. Like, okay, so now they're keeping that puke promise of, like, there's going to be some disgusting crap that's going to happen. And now this is where that promise comes to fruition.
And you know what? I was fine with it.
Yeah. I was just sitting there like, is he, like, stabbing, like, poking him in the brain? Like, what is he doing in there?
Yeah.
With stabbing both arms into his eyes. And then Grog with the axe, I just loved, where he splits them. And then every swing, he's swearing and yelling at him. It was beautiful.
It was.
So those two giants fall down, and then they have that thing of like mine fall first, and no, it didn't. But again, this brings questions to me, because when you bring a god character in, it causes problems and it causes questions. Mainly being, how did Pike wipe out 2 waves of these things and not hit the Duke, not hit the other 2 giants? And why didn't they just go, Pike, go get him?
Yeah, I think some of this can be explained in D&D just based on the spells that she would use or what she's using at the time. But in a show like this, it isn't explained, and there's no real reason that you can see for why it happens. My reasoning that I used in my head was the things that she wiped out, minus the giants, I have no explanation for that, was all undead, and the Duke isn't undead.
That's true.
We think.
That's a good point. That's a very valid point.
The giants, though, maybe they were just too big. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I've always kind of wondered, like, are the giants undead, or are they just like really in rough shape with that? Like, Grog has already shown that he can walk around with his ribs hanging out and be okay.
Right.
So are the giants undead or not? Like, they don't have their faces falling apart. Like, I would think if they're undead, there would be more. Like, they've done a pretty good job of showing undead to this point.
Yeah.
I just thought that kind of added to their menace. Like, I don't know. And I mean, the one giant that she did kill is because she blasted through the top of his head when she landed.
Yeah. Like Thor.
Him in half. Yeah, exactly. Like Thor. But then they kill the giants, and then the Duke goes to run away. And which, again, I really like that aspect of it, because that is the thing that we do see, where the biggest, toughest, baddest guy of them all, when the tides have turned and he really doesn't have an army at his back, really isn't so tough anymore. And he's like, screw this.
Yeah, no ace in his sleeve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's where we get to see Percy blow his knee out, and the people take their
mob justice.
Yeah, the mob justice on him. And I do like the fact too that they didn't leave him whimpering and cowering in the street. He was still defiant and mouthy to the very end, insulting them and calling them out as they were stabbing him to death.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought it was a very poetic way for him to go too, for Percy not to blow him away like he has with every single other person on his list. He let the people that have been suffering the most from him do what they do, and I thought it was a cool way to leave it.
And on a side note, that also reinforces his claim when it comes down, because there's a psychological thing that if you want someone to like you, you get them to do a favor for you. You ask them to do a favor, and that makes someone, for whatever reason, psychologically, makes someone feel more enamored to you. And that's something that he kind of did, where it's like, yeah, you know what? I ran away. I was gone for a long time. Now I'm back. Now I'm saying that you should follow me. Here's a bone. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
Right? And gives them an opportunity to fight back. Not just saying, come fight with me. It's like, no, here, you do this. This dude that's been bothering you for so long, and then come back. But then that was the other thing that I found a little bit problematic, was Yenin coming back with a crowd of people.
Yep.
Which, again, you can kind of understand that, because we did have that moment on the rooftop where we hear the entire city or town being ripped apart. You can see them wanting to take charge, especially when their leader, like Yenin, is saying that we have a sign from the Sun Father, or the Dawn Father.
Dawn Father, yeah.
Yeah, that's this. And that's also something that kind of confused me, where I'm like, okay, there's Dawn Father, there's the Everlight. Like, are they the same thing? Is the Dawn Father more powerful than the Everlight because the Dawn Father sent Pike here? Because
there is a lot of pantheons. There's more than one pantheon of gods in this world. So I'm not 100% sure if they're actually two different people, or if it's like two different views of what that god is. So
that would make sense.
Right, because I know that who Pike and the sisters at the temple worship is an entity that also represents truth. And I'm not sure about what the Dawn Father is, but in the ideals of who they are, who they're representing, the Dawn Father is male and the Everlight is female. Yeah. So they wouldn't be the same person, or are they?
Well, I mean, that's where it gets confusing, and I can see that as a thing of possibly being, like if you say to your god, give me a sign that everything is going to be okay, and then all of a sudden you see a rainbow cast across the sky, you're like, okay, that's my sign. So you can see this being like, Dawn Father, give us a sign, and then this glowing little gnome falls out of the sky and blasts the hell out of everybody. Like, okay, that's our sign that we need to be stepping in now, because that's the Dawn Father giving us her sign. Exactly. But you can see where it's a little bit confusing, where it's like, okay, well, did the Dawn Father send her, or give, like, yeah. So I think it's more that's Occam's razor plays into this one, whereas the most logical explanation is that, and that's that they were looking for a sign that the tide of the battle was turning, and Pike's appearance was that sign.
And I believe that's what it is that it's just two different groups of people's idea of who this entity is. I think that's what it is. But
yeah. But again, for just so many things happening is kind of strange. Like there's so many weird little speed bumps in this episode that you start to kind of become more critical than you would necessarily be in a typical episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then we have Pike gives her little speech and then makes everybody's swords glow and they fight. But again, that was brought to me a question, whereas like maybe it is like she's already used the magic and that spell and she can't use it again, or she's a re-up or whatever it is. But if that's the case, why doesn't she just why does she risk the lives of all of the rebellion by making their weapons glow and saying go fight the Horde, unless it's to give them the substance and the ability or the satisfaction of actually fighting back and defending themselves? Why doesn't she just pound her mace 3 more times and wipe out the rest of the army?
I don't know.
Right, that's the only thing I could come up to, is giving the rest of them purchase, giving the rest of them buy-in on, like what Percy did with the Duke, and just being, you've been suffering for so long, I'm going to give you the abilities, so you're probably not going to die by doing this. Go take your revenge. Like, you've been pent up for so long and not be able to talk or peep or do anything. Now's your time to just go swing your pitchforks and just, as she said, crush some fucking heads.
Right.
Which, again, was so out of character. Like, that, her dialogue in this episode really kind of blew me away in some scenes where I'm like, that's such a dichotomy from where we left her to what she is now. Was such a massive leap.
Yeah.
And her language is so... Like, if you had a face-to-face with your god, and you're like, I don't like the fact that I brawl in bars, and I go out and I kill people, and like, it's really not that bad. Would you then take that as license, then just go, like, off the cliff with it?
I can definitely understand your criticism of it. I will say that it wasn't something that popped out to me, but I also didn't think about it. So, I guess it's something that I would have to chew on, but...
Yeah. But then we do have that moment of character development for Vex, where she actually does step back and calls Percy the leader.
Yep.
On this.
Good.
Which was nice, because that's the thing that, like, Percy's supposed to be leading up to this. And then he takes them to the hidden tunnel, and that's where we have a kind of an addressing of the thing, where he tells Cass, like, look, I'm sorry, and she basically says, yeah, it's okay. I know.
Yeah, don't like it.
Like, they were so slow, and that was the thing that bothered me with this episode, is because we had the past 2 episodes where they laid so much groundwork for stuff, and then everything they just got rid of. Like, Pike, we have such a slow burn for Pike, and then she's here, she's powerful, she's a demigod, she wipes everything out. We have the slow burn of Percy and Cass, and over a couple of episodes, and then they get to a point where they brush it under the rug. And it just seems like so many storylines, and they're just like, okay, we have to close this, we have to move on to the next, because we don't have enough time. And it just seemed, for the amount of time they spent laying groundwork, the payoff wasn't beneficial, and wasn't what I was expecting for it.
I really like Cassandra as a character. I think that she's a strong, powerful woman, and I think that they have not given her the finality that she needs in any of these scenes. When she discusses the fact that she's a kestrel and says, I've been feeding information, she doesn't get any kind of payback from that. When she's like squabbling with Percy, and all of a sudden Percy's the leader, but they still have unfinished business with the fact that he left her for dead, there's no payoff for it. And it kills me, because she's such a cool character and she's a survivor, and they just keep writing her to shrug her shoulders and move on.
Yeah, very much so. And that's very problematic. Like, they can do so much more with this character, and we don't know what's going to be coming down the pipes for her, but they've set her up to be a really cool character, and like you said, they just keep falling flat on the delivery for her.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like she's a lot more powerful than she appears, but whenever she's given an opportunity to flex that power in any way, shape, or form,
exactly,
she just kowtows, and it's like, okay, it's fine. Like,
that's fine.
I've got a snarky comment for you, but I'm not going to. It's like the all bark and no bite.
Yeah,
kind of character.
Is that really Cassandra? Come on.
Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna see. It's just. I like the fact that she's mouthy. I like the fact that she's able to snap back and she's able to stand up for herself, because she's been through a lot, and we don't know what she's been through with the Briarwoods. From what we've seen, probably not anything good.
Yeah.
I don't think those are really the people that you want to be kept as a house pet for, and I can't see her being anything more than a house pet for them, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with her, because right now they're definitely not doing her justice.
Hopefully something.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But I mean, she does have that one snarky comment where she's like, the tunnel is great for hiding from annoying brothers. But they go deeper into the dungeon, and then they leave the episode on quite the hook, where they find someone missing a hand, talking about missing limbs, missing a hand in the dungeon, saying that they're a foe of the Briarwoods, and they stand up, and then Mr. Blacksmoke comes back and points the gun in her face.
Womp womp womp.
And we fade to
It's a good hook.
It's a great hook. That is a fantastic thing, and that's what I was trying to explain to people in the past, is that you leave it on a hook, but you don't leave a hook in the middle of a battle scene. You don't leave a hook in, like, there's ways to leave hooks, and this is a really good hook on this, because it's bringing up, you're ending on a mystery tied to another mystery. So there's this person who's in prison, who's missing an arm, who hates the Briarwoods, but somehow has triggered Percy's demonic side. That we still don't know what it is. Just something brought the smoke out.
And I guess that's a secret that we'll learn next week.
Or later in the episode. Depending, they may want to... They may end up taking this black smoke thing and writing it through to the final episode and then giving us a 2-second explanation on the end of it. But again, I mean, from a objective perspective and from a normal perspective, fantastic show, fantastic episode. It was great. It carried things along. But if you really want to get into the dirt on things, there was more missteps, which I'm really hoping that there's only 3 episodes left. I'm really hoping that these missteps end.
Yeah, it's still continues to be visually stunning. The animation is just, it's really good, very interesting.
Yeah. And
especially the comedic points are very fun and really well written. It's just these little things that in the past few episodes seem to be kind of starting to pile up that makes me turn my head and go,
Yeah. But one thing I will say is that I complained that the last 2 episodes were kind of the saggy middle bit of the story. This episode wasn't a saggy middle. This episode was, I think, almost seemed like a recognition that they had a saggy middle and they were trying to close things off pretty quick so they can continue on with the story. So I've got big expectations for... Like, the end of last episode, I was anxious about what was going to happen in this episode. And all my anxieties came true. However, I don't have that anxiety moving into the next one. I actually have boosted expectations for what's going to happen for the next one, because I think whatever it was in their system, they got it out. And I think, honestly, part of it was the whole Pike thing. I think that it really seems like Pike's storyline really tossed a wrench into this past couple of episodes. Because this was also there was some episodes, there was one episode we didn't see Pike at all. There was a couple episodes where we only saw her pop up once. And then these last 2 episodes beyond this one, it was really trying all of a sudden to push her storyline further. And then it brought it to this point. So,
yeah, I can definitely see that. I guess we'll see in the next few weeks how it turns out. But I still have very high expectations, and Silas and Delilah are still out there. And as far as I'm concerned, they're the coolest villains ever. So they've got to do something with that.
They're pretty awesome. I love what they're doing with them. And I love the fact that, because you would automatically think that from storytelling in the past and everything, that Silas, being the vampire, being the bigger character, being male, is the one that's in charge and is the dominant one and the one that's in control of everything. And we learn in this episode that he has no idea what the hell's going on.
Yeah, he's
got some idea
more
of
than
the
a
plan.
pawn.
Yeah, but he doesn't know what Delilah's doing, how she's doing it. I think he knows there's a plan. He knows aspects of the plan. He knows that the book is tied into it, and she did something to bring him back to life, obviously. But like, we don't know if the Whispered One is talking to Delilah, if they can communicate with it, or exactly what's happening along the way. And like I said, it appears that Silas doesn't know either.
The one thing we do know is that they do indeed love each other.
They do. There's no doubt about what their relationship is anymore.
Yep.
And I love that. The one part that confused me again was the biggest thing I think that confuses me for this entire story so far, and I think that one of my biggest criticisms for this is there is zero timeline.
Yeah, I've harped on that a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, like, we see them, the cold open, we see this whole thing happening, And Silas gets turned into a vampire, and then they kiss on the bed, and that fades to them kissing on the balcony in present time. And now Silas has got short hair, but I mean, hair gets cut, but he's got gray streaks through it. Vampires don't age that quickly. And why did Silas age? What was that?
Maybe these ones do?
I was going to say, why did Silas age, but Delilah didn't? Delilah didn't develop any gray hair. And she's not a vampire.
Or is she?
So that's the thing where I'm just kind of like, that's where I find... I mean, it's interesting in a sense to be watching a series to go through that has no timeline. That you're just along for the ride and seeing how it all plays out. But for someone that does this for a living and I fixate on timelines, it really is kind of like a thorn in my side or like a stone in my shoe where I'm like, okay, well, how long is this happening? How far did Pike have to go? How long ago did she make this deal with a Whispered One? How old is that book? How old are they? And how old, like, when did they come to take over Whitestone? Like, these are all the backstory questions that I want to know. Is for how long after she saved Silas did they go to take over Whitestone? And what kind of hell did they raise in the meantime?
And I think those are all reasonable questions that, like, we've gotten nothing. We've gotten no semblance. The only timeline we kind of have is that the attack on Whitestone that sent Percy away was somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That's it.
So we have that. But I mean, we also, because when it comes to timeline, it also comes to distance. And we don't know how far Pike had to travel to go to the temple. We don't know how far they had to travel from the Sovereign's castle to get to Whitestone.
Yep.
There's all of these things that, and again, like, so that is a criticism. But the thing with Delilah and Silas and knowing, like, the other stuff I was just talking about, that's just more to curiosity. I love the characters so much. I want to know more about them. I want to know, like, what other hell have they raised? How long have they been on Earth doing this kind of stuff? What other cities have they taken over for whatever reason? Like, what, these are badass enemies. What are they capable of, and what have they done? And have they been stopped before? That's a big question, is have they been stopped, or have all of their plans gone off without a hitch to this end? Because to this end, it seems like it. The Sovereign went really quick. Taking over Whitestone went really quick. So have they tried other big name plans in the past and been stopped?
It's a good question.
We'll have to find out. Well, next week, I think LJ is back from her side quest. Hopefully she's not going to come in a flash of light and destroy our computers. Like Pike did. But LJ should be back with us next week. And we'll see what happens with that. But thank you very much. So everyone, this has been After the Roll, The Legend of Vox Machina, Season 1, Episode 9, The Tide of the Bone. After the Roll is the show that we have, that we break it down. And after that, we break down other shows. We've already done The Wheel of Time. Now we're doing Legend of Vox Machina. And we'll be repeating these and possibly adding a couple of others as time goes through. Any final thoughts on this episode?
Not on this episode. I'm just hoping that we get some payoff coming up, and that my recommendation to watch this doesn't spoil.
I don't think that's a risk. I am enjoying this, and again, I think we'll both reiterate to everyone out there, we are coming at this from a hyper-critical perspective. Sitting down and watching this just for sheer enjoyment, you are going to enjoy the hell out of the show. It is fantastic. Yep. It is well written. It is well done. It's got great characters, great jokes. Things fall in together really well. And it's taking a tabletop RPG and turning it into a show, which is something I've never really seen done to this effect before. And it was beautifully done. But if you're on a show where you're pulling apart storylines and story arcs and character arcs and stuff like that, this is the stuff you're going to get into. We're not saying it's a bad show. We're not saying don't watch it. We're saying it is a fantastic show. Go watch it. These are just things that if you want to get finicky with, and if you think about it, it's kind of like going to see a classical concert or an orchestral concert. You can sit there and enjoy the chamber music and listen to what's being played, but if you play the cello, you're probably going to pick up on the missed notes. If you don't play the cello, you're just going to enjoy some really good music.
Absolutely.
And that's what this is. Thank you very much, Billy.
Thank you.
Have a fantastic night. Get some sleep.
You as well.
I will. I'll talk to you very soon. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.